Hi, everybody. We have Peter Svidler here. He is here to answer lots of very good chess questions from some of the youngest, most talented chess players in the country. And I'm really excited to have you, Peter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Doing fine. Yeah, kind of going from. Yeah, like I don't know how to finish that sentence. I'm still embarrassed about almost missing this and actually holding everybody up for about 15
Oh
minutes.
no, we always start like 10 minutes late. This is actually early. Usually we start like 45 minutes late, so 15 minutes is like we're really crushing it so far. So we got a lot of questions, and we got one question a lot of times. Like maybe like 4 or 5 people ask the same exact question. And I don't know, if anyone has, I'll just say it.
Is it what is my favorite piece?
How did you know?
Yeah, not from this crowd. I'm pretty sure you got none of those from this crowd.
That was not the question. The question dealt with time trouble and time management. And
that is interesting to me. Yeah, that's not what people normally ask. I've already seen it in this chat as well. So I know you're not making things up, but it's unusual that people are so concerned with this question.
They lose on time every game. Every game a move 12 flag falls. Let me read some of the specific questions. Somebody said how to improve time management. There was, I know Matt, you know what, Max, you mind if I unmute you and you can kind of talk about it? Because I know you definitely asked about time management. So I'd like to have you talk to Peter directly. You're unmuted.
Oh yeah, hello. I was just wondering, like, what your recommendations for like time management are when you're in a position that you like are unfamiliar with, or like don't know, or if you're caught off guard in like preparation or something. Like, how much time would you go spending in that position versus saving it for like the more critical part of the game, like
that actually is a very interesting question. Yeah, and I have a feeling, if I really let myself go, I could go in like 5 different directions at once, and we would never see a second question in this show. But some personal backstory, because it might be a bit relevant. As a kid, I was a huge time travel addict. I remember I won, it will not sound very impressive, but those are actually, considering the town in question is Leningrad/St. Petersburg, those were decent tournaments. I won the quarterfinal of the city championship when I was, I want to say maybe 11. And there was an 11-round Swiss in which I think I counted after the tournament. I was in bad time trouble, I think in 8 games out of 11. And out of those 8, I think in maybe 3 or 4, I had about a minute for 20 on a mechanical clock with no increment, obviously. And it didn't even bother me. It didn't even bother me necessarily, because I knew, like, in those years, you need to have this kind of, you needed to have this arcane knowledge of, like, exactly when the flag falls, for instance, and that was something that you needed to study, and you needed to know the make of the clock and so on. But I generally thought that, I mean, this is fine. I will think of the opponent on my opponent's time, and I will never ever lose on time. And I indeed never. I think I pretty much never lost on time when I was a kid. I would occasionally make mistakes and lose games because of time trouble, but my confidence was extremely high. That was to do with me being a young idiot, but also because I was sort of reasonably good at the game and wasn't playing against people who were good enough to punish me consistently. And then time troubles just kind of disappeared. And the thing is, I'm not trying to hide some trade secrets from you. I genuinely don't remember exactly what caused the change, because by the time I got to, I don't know, 17, 18, it's not that I would never be in time troubles. I would occasionally face time trouble, but they became few and far between. And I would like to credit one of the things, like, sort of, it's weird. I still do it, even though I really don't know why I do it anymore. One of the lasting things that happened to me in terms of, lessons that were taught during the 2 sessions of the Kasparov School that I attended, the very last 2 sessions of the Kasparov School before it was finally disbanded because Gary was, Botvinnik just was no longer doing it for years before I came in, and Kasparov was also becoming busier and busier with other things. But they did teach us that old Botvinnik method of noting on your score sheet specifically how much time you spent on the first 15 moves. I don't think they had a fight necessarily, but Botvinnik, I think, just gradually, he wasn't a very young man by that point. As far as I know, the lore of the school, it wasn't really that they had a falling out. It was just more of a sort of gradual phasing out due to the fact that Botvinnik wasn't really getting any younger and dealing with 15 rowdy-ish kids for weeks on end wasn't his idea of fun anymore. But yeah, Botvinnik had this idea that if you write down on the score sheet the time you spend on the first 15 moves, with the idea that you should not be spending more than half an hour on the first 15 moves. This will help you with sort of self-discipline, and it will make you more aware how much time you spend in the opening, which should go some way towards solving those issues, because by keeping track of things, you do the idea, at least the idea goes, by keeping track of these things, you become a lot more aware of how they go. You can sort of start maybe noticing patterns, exactly when, instead of half an hour, you spend, I don't know, 75 minutes on the first 15 moves. You also have to realize that that system was suggested to us when the prevalent time control was 2 hours for 40, and Botvinnik probably formulated it when time control was actually 2.5 hours for 40, which is something you will never ever see in your careers. Even 2 hours for 40 these days is, takes effort to find, but 2.5 hours for 40 disappeared in my lifetime, not even your lifetime. But that is something that definitely stuck with me. But also another thing that was suggested to us as a student. I remember there was a lecture, I'm pretty sure it was a lecture by Dvoretsky, who was, during one of the sessions, he was a guest lecturer. And I think Jen has heard me tell this story like 15 times. I'm like a broken record on this particular topic, but I think it's a useful bit of advice nonetheless. And Dvoretsky mentioned it in passing. He wasn't really basing like the entire lesson on this or anything, but that was something that I think a lot of people underappreciate as a bit of very, very solid advice. And that advice is, if you're faced with an unpleasant choice and you don't know, let's say you're really unsure if you're losing and your position is in danger, but you do have a mathematically only move, but you have no idea what that move leads to. The temptation might be to actually try and figure out what it leads to, which is a strict misplay, in video games terms. You absolutely, like, if you're certain, obviously there will be situations where if you tank for half an hour, maybe you will find other options. But if we're talking about situations where you genuinely have the one option, but it might be losing, for instance, or you might be in trouble, you still have to make that move the moment you establish it's the only move, and then think on your opponent's time, regardless of what the conclusion is. And that will save you untold amounts of time over the course of your career, actually, because I think we are kind of hardwired not to commit to anything unless we know it's good. But it becomes very, very irrelevant if you're still going to make that move 10 minutes later. You might be slightly happier making that move, but you have burned 10 minutes on your clock. And not doing that will actually be extremely useful. Just conditioning yourself never ever to do that. But that doesn't really answer Max's question. And the part of Max's question which I found very interesting was he specifically mentioned something I was going to mention in the answer anyway. I think the way to deal with time troubles and the way to improve at not getting into time troubles will have a lot to do with understanding and sensing what the critical position in the game is. Unfortunately, I can give absolutely no advice as to how to train that, apart from playing a lot of chess. I think this is just something that comes with practice. Maybe there are some people out there who know of what exercises could help you with that. But genuinely, like let's say if you try solving, the issue with solving is by the very nature of solving a study, you know that the position they gave you is a critical position. So you know you have to invest time and energy into finding the best move there. That's like why they gave you the position. Whereas in the game, there will be, like in the 40-move game, there will be probably 30 moves where even if the best move actually exists, the second best move will be barely distinguishable from the best move in terms of your expected value. And the evaluation will not change very much if you make the second best move. And there will be those, I don't know, 5 to 10 moves, 5 to 10 critical situations in a game where if you actually miss that you really had to concentrate and find the best move there, that will potentially lose you the game, or it will make the game take a turn for the worse. And yeah, sadly, apart from saying this is a very important skill, I can't really suggest how you train it apart from paying attention during games, and maybe after the game, perhaps, let's say, if you catch yourself missing something important after the game, you come back to that moment and you think, I kind of relaxed here. I decided that it's really not that important for me to think very deeply on that particular decision. And I made a move quickly. And it turned out that there was an important nuance I missed. And that made everything go sort of sharply downhill. And try to figure out what the reason was for you missing the thing. But yeah, this is, one of the reasons why I've been generally, in particular this year, when there's not a lot of practice, you move, at least for me, there was not a lot of chances to play chess, but there was a lot of offers suddenly for me to go into some form of teaching, and I've been sort of saying no to all of them, or pretty much all of them, because I feel a bit fake trying to teach. When, whenever I try to talk about any kind of a subject like this, eventually, 5 minutes in or 10 minutes in, I just hit a block where I say, okay, so this is the problem. I have no idea how you solve it. And apart from becoming 45 and amassing the wealth of experience you will amass by the time you're 45, which is not very helpful to you. So I think the best I can do in most of these cases is tell you what you should be sort of striving for, and what the critical things to look out for are. But yeah, I don't think I actually have a solution to the question that was asked, apart from trying to kind of discipline yourself not to tank too much in the openings, listening to us, like in particular, once again, another facet of the question Max asked, dealing with novelties in the openings. Sometimes the novelty will be of such quality that you will just know that if you make a mistake here, you die. And then you absolutely do have to tank. But often if somebody surprises you with something you haven't been prepared for, it just sort of, it shakes you off balance, but it doesn't really threaten your entire game at this one moment. And you should probably teach yourself to identify those moments, and to teach yourself to, not wallow in self-pity for too long, because that's really not very helpful. You spend, your 1 minute saying to yourself, why haven't I prepared for this, you idiot, like I do. Like I normally would definitely spend a minute or two cursing at myself softly. But then you just find something that looks attractive. For me, generally, when I face a novelty, I try to identify, first of all, you kind of try to figure out what the expected response is and how dangerous it will be for you to go down the absolute main stem. Like you normally have an idea what the main reply to the novelty is, and that's generally will be what they prepared for. So you have to make a choice of whether actually to allow all this or to try and look for a move that will be a bit of a sideline, probably not the best move in the position, but maybe something that they haven't analyzed so deeply. And you need to make those considerations quickly. And for me, I generally like to play something slightly, off kilter. As soon as possible, you want to try to take the game to sort of an equal ground where you don't know anything and they hopefully also don't know anything. And I probably should stop talking as well, because that has been one question I think I've already...
Yeah, we can go back to it. I do have a question that's related to that real quickly.
Sure.
That I've always wondered about. So you see somebody like Grischuk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who gets in, I'd say, like legendary time travel problems his whole career.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think that holds him back, if at all?
It's very difficult to say, because like I mean the obvious answer would be, he would be like, I don't know if world champion material, but definitely like a challenger material in terms of his natural gifts, if he just didn't have that issue. But I think, he belongs to a very different school of chess than I do, despite, both of us, we are not very different in age. And we do definitely all both belong to, we've been taught by Soviet teachers and so on. But he is very much of the, I need to find the best move in the position school of thought, where I have always been and will remain until I stop playing. I've always been a kind of a guy who, says to himself, this looks good enough. I'm done looking. I'm sort of satisfied with how this looks. Let's just make a move and move on. And for somebody like him, who is genuinely very interested in looking for quote unquote absolute truth, telling him, Sasha, play faster, you'll become world champion in 2 years, is, probably not very helpful, because he would need to change his entire MO. And for somebody who has had tremendous amount of success playing the way he's been playing, if you change something, which I firmly believe is like the bedrock of how he approaches playing chess, and that is approaching pretty much every single position as if it's a critical position, it might break something. If you tell him not to do that, it might break something in the way he approaches chess, and he might actually start playing worse. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one, because I mean, he's not doing this for joy. He's not. I don't think he's deriving any particular happiness out of, the playing on increment in every single game. And he's definitely had, game he threw games through, not in the, corruption sense, but like he definitely has had games which were completely derailed by his horrendous time issues. But
I'm getting a related question too. Like Nepomniachtchi seems to be almost the exact opposite.
Yeah, his
very quickly.
Yeah, he does. He definitely trusts his sort of natural understanding of where things go a lot more than Sasha does. And once again, you can find plenty of examples of Nepo just like blitzing one move too many, and the game ending, and he's sitting there, looking kind of silly because he didn't think for even like 5 minutes on a decision where he definitely needed to. But yeah, it's just so personal. You can't really, in particular, when you talk of players of their general magnitude, which is like genuine like top 5 material. It's just so difficult to generalize and to prescribe things which will work uniformly well for anybody, for everybody. I think Jan would probably benefit from playing slightly slower and sitting on his hands a little bit more, and Sasha probably would benefit by trusting himself a little bit more, and not going for the third and the fourth round of calculating the same thing over and over again. But
so we need to combine them both, and they will be world champion.
Sort of, yeah.
Probably. Magnus, watch out. I actually have a question for y'all, but I need to know, Kostya, can I share my screen? Is that something that works, or are you not set up for it? Because the question I have is, like, basically, what I can try? Okay, so the question is basically, what are some like underrated openings? Number one for white against e4, e5, against the Sicilian, and for black just in general, like just openings that are like, you think they're like pretty decent, but that nobody really plays for some reason. And I don't know if that's a tough question, but I'm going to share this.
I have a perfect answer for this, right? Which will just.
Can people see the board, by the way? Did I do it correctly?
Yeah, I could have also done this from my end, but I'm not sure.
Well, let's hear your perfect. Let's hear your perfect answer.
Jen actually asked a prediction. Is running a prediction in chat now, and I like people should be able to get this in like.
This is it.
Thank you. Yes, I mean you could have given the kids slightly more time to get that in, but
I fear it's an obvious.
And I mean, like I don't even mean this entirely as a troll either. I think Scandi is better than the reputation it normally has. When
all right, we need to stop the meeting. I'm sorry. We gotta end this right now.
But I'm also like I'm sort of on the record. I've done this extremely boring speech in previous situations like this, where people would ask me like, is the Mora, for instance, a playable thing to play against the Sicilian?
And just to show what the Mora is.
Yeah, and I mean the simple answer is actually yes, up to a certain level. I'm pretty sure it is playable. But my extremely Soviet approach to this, and in particular when I'm talking to a group of kids who are gifted and already quite good at the game and are trying to become better, is that yes, there are shortcuts like this which will help you, which will dramatically cut down on your preparation time, and I think that's sort of one of the biggest advantages of let's say adopting something like the Scandi against 1e4 or the Smith Mora against the Sicilian, is that you just absolutely destroy the need to differentiate between the Nidorfs and the Dragons and the Sveshnikovs and the Paulsens of this world, because you just don't let them play them, and that just so dramatically cuts down on the amount of information you're supposed to consume to be able to play the open Sicilians. But what it also does is that it hinders your development very, very significantly, because you don't get the experience playing the open Sicilian. I think here you kind of have to differentiate. You have to ask yourself what your sort of medium and long-term goals are, because if let's say what you need is a new opening for one tournament, and you're willing to invest into something like this for one tournament, it's one thing. But if you just spend years and years playing something like this to the exclusion of everything else, you are depriving yourself of an opportunity to learn all kinds of pawn structures that you eventually will have to have practice with them. And if you don't start when you're young, it will be an issue learning them when you're much older. So I am generally very much in favor of playing, quote unquote, classical openings, because I think you need that experience, and you need to start getting that experience as early as possible. But yeah, when we talk about underrated opening, everything is playable these days up to a point. People in chat have been saying that Mora has been refuted. I mean, to a degree, but not. I mean, like, what do you think is the expected rating of a person who will see the Mora from you for the first time without, having the benefit of preparing to you for like a couple of days? You play the Mora for the first time. So what do you think is the expected level of a guy playing black for that guy to actually be sort of a favorite against you playing the Mora if you do know what you're doing there? I mean, Peter Svidler with white versus this chat with black. Probably black is favored, honestly, because I don't know what I'm doing in the Mora. I have spent 0 minutes actually learning the move orders, and I might not equalize with white. But the point is, it's refuted for a given value of refuted, which in case of the Mora probably means that black gets to keep the extra pawn, and white will have some positional compensation for it, but not quite enough. Which is still like, if you don't care about those things, you do have to have a healthy disregard for material equality and things, which I think is a useful thing to have, in particular when you're young. You shouldn't really be that worried about playing unbalanced positions and positions which are probably not entirely correct.
Can I ask, Phil, since you're talking about the Mora, another problem I've always found is people can just transpose into like some kind
knight
of
f6, I guess. Yeah.
This is usually the main line against C. So what I'm trying to say is, on C3, knight f6 is a very popular move and considered okay for black, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so when you play the Smith Mora, they can do it anyway. And they
but the thing is, the Sicilian players really, really hate the Latvian players.
Oh, really?
And I think, like, for me, I would genuinely, like, the Latvian players aren't, I think, not very widely spread amongst the top players. So it hasn't been a very, large problem for me in my career. But I can tell you that if I see that I'm playing against somebody who plays e4, c5, c3, I am probably not playing e4, c5.
Oh, wow.
And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. So for me, this wouldn't be such a discouragement anyway, because I think, the Sicilian players probably want to play their Sicilians and not their Latin. So yeah, I don't know. But we've already, like, once again, I've gone down some kind of a weird rabbit hole, and this wasn't really what the question was about. Underrated openings against 1e4. I mean, pretty much everything is playable. The Caro is definitely very mainstream these days. Obviously, I mean, e5, c5 is playable. The French, like, I personally should not be playing the French with either color. I have no idea what I'm doing. But there's nothing, intrinsically wrong with the French. There are some things wrong with the French, but it's a playable opening, and you can, now you have a benefit of a lot of very strong players recording very decent quality material on the French. So,
real quick, we have a lot of questions, but I want to ask you one slightly related one. Is there any overrated openings? Like openings that people play and they're known to be good that you think, yeah, I don't really like this opening so much?
I think that's very personal. I think, like, there are things that don't suit me personally as a player. Like for me, the example would be, although I don't think you can count it as an overrated opening, because it's these days not very overrated. It's sort of disappeared from top grandmaster practice. But in the mid-90s, I had a brief period where I tried to become a King's Indian player with black. And it just did not work for me. It turned out I just have no natural aptitude for those structures. I had decent-ish results because I was, like, generally okay at chess, so I could, like, work my way out of difficult positions. But it just didn't agree with me structurally at all. Very early on, I realized I'm getting the kinds of positions where I'm just sitting there hating every minute of it. And for me, it's a very, very unhelpful situation. I know this about myself. I really do need to at least slightly like what I have on the board for me to function properly as a chess player. Not very many people, I mean, there's definitely some very strong players in the history of chess who this wouldn't apply to. And I think it's a huge, huge advantage if that doesn't apply to you. If you can play positions you don't like trust in, but you can still play well because you think, I mean, it doesn't matter. The game is not 15 moves long, it's 40 moves long, or 50 or 60. So if I'm much worse by move 15 with black, it's irrelevant because I can still outplay the other guy. But for me, it's not that it's impossible, but it's much harder than for somebody like, I don't know, Alexander Morozevich comes to mind, for instance, who was throughout his career extremely capable of playing pretty much anything, provided he put some work into understanding that anything. And he was very comfortable not being anywhere near equal by move 10 or 15, because he correctly trusted his ability to deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah, and also Dragon, but I don't think anybody overrates the Dragon. There's been a mention of Dragon in chat. I mean, Dragon is playable. The issue with Dragon is, once you start meeting people who are reasonably well prepared, it stops being so much fun.
Can I ask a question about the Dragon? Would you characterize it as if you play somebody who's really well prepared, you're going to maybe be very, very slightly worse and without a fun position? Or is that...
I don't even know, because like there's those lines. Actually, if we're discussing openings, we did set up something that would allow me to move the pieces.
Oh, sure. We'll let you move the pieces.
Can we switch to that? Hang on.
I'll stop my screen share. Now you can share yours.
Yeah. So
I do have some other questions, but we can.
Yeah. So if we talk about dragons, like I'm not really up to date. I'm not really up to date on how it stands, right? Because it sort of disappeared. At some point, like Magnus was playing it and Tamor was playing it and Hikaru was playing it, but then it sort of went away. And the issue here is that I think a lot of people are just doing this now. And after D5, you have this, selection of things where you're supposed to be slightly worse. Like there's this line where you maybe equalize and maybe you don't, right? And very few people actually play E5 in this position these days, although famously Gawain Jones played this against Magnus and was a piece up by move 15 because Magnus picked something up and then still lost. But the issue is, I think you might be losing by force in some of these lines, right? Like I genuinely don't know if they haven't found a forced win for white somewhere around here. I've never actually studied any of this with either color because it was completely irrelevant to my career throughout my career. But I wouldn't entirely rule out that, all of this nonsense. I can't even remember the exact move orders, but at some point, G4, HG, F4 starts. And like with the current machines, everything is supposed to be a draw, but like, is it really? I think, it's never going to be better for black. I think the question is whether this is a draw, or whether against somebody extremely well prepared, you just get swept off the board. So yeah, the issue with Dragon is that, in the long castles lines, I think you're fighting for equality without too much fun. And in the bishop c4 lines, you might have some kind of a, really terrifying type of fun where, it's not for everybody. And also, I don't think you are guaranteed to survive. To my very, very limited knowledge, once again, it has to be prefaced by saying I haven't actually looked at this in forever.
Can I just clarify something? Because we have players of all different levels here. So like, you're talking more at the top level, like Grandmaster, International Master. It becomes difficult because players are well prepared. You don't get to do like the fun sacrifices that you might get against 1900 players, 1800 players, because they won't know what they're doing. You'll catch them in some traps. But something like the Najdorf, that it's kind of playable all the way up to the top.
Absolutely, yeah. Najdorf will be playable at any level, and yeah, and what Greg said there, it's also like you have to make a disclaimer that, you know, all of these problems I'm describing for Black and the Dragon, they really only do apply once you get reasonably high, because up to a certain level, and I think that level is actually quite high. It's not even like you're not supposed to stop playing the dragon when you like hit international master or something. Hey, Fabi. But up to a certain level, you're perfectly entitled to play all of this, because nobody really will know, you know, the opening well enough from the white side to for you to be properly scared of it.
So I'm going to quickly take a question that we got. This is from International Master, who's part of our group, but he's not here today. And his question was, what material and process did you use to get to Grandmaster? And by process, he means, like, how did you spend your time? Like,
yeah, it's kind of weird, because I had those couple of years where I made those jumps, and I mean, compared to this chat, I was an extremely slow learner. I became Grandmaster at 18. I think
that's,
you know,
pretty good. That's pretty good.
I think these days, you know, like you I mean, it's probably still fine, but you're, you know, nowhere near the top or even the middle of the class in terms of like.
And by the way, just to give a heads up, I may, like, since we do have a lot of questions, I may like cut you off after a few minutes. It's like a time trouble test, you know, so we can get to some of the other ones. You don't mind if I do that?
Yeah, no, of course not. Of course
cool,
not. But for me, I had my childhood coach until I was maybe 13 or 14, and then I worked alone for a couple of years, and I got to international master when I was, I think, 14 or 15 by getting a norm in every tournament I played, and then I sort of stagnated for about 2 or 3 years, and then by 94, it turned out that like all the inside conditions were met, and in 94 I once again got the norm in every single tournament I played, in most cases by sort of overshooting the norm by a point. But there was no real, like, there's no groundbreaking hidden secret that I can tell you on this topic. I switched from, you know, my childhood trainer was very, very good at inspiring love for the game. He was a very good person to, you know, work with young kids, where I think making sure that the enthusiasm doesn't go away is maybe the most important thing. But he left me with a very, very dodgy opening repertoire. I was basically playing the Cole more or less exclusively until I was maybe 13 with white, and this is not.
And the Kale is when you just play like D4.
Basically, it's a Maran. It's a Maran with colors reversed. Like you go D4, and you're not even smart enough to play the Londons. So you go Knight f3, like E6, E3. Yeah, like you lock it in. You don't go Bishop f4. You play Bishop D3, Knight BD2, C3, and you push for E3, E4. It's pretty much exactly the Maran with the colors reversed. And I mean, the Maran maybe comes close to equalizing the way it is. So Maran with one tempo up is going to be a fine opening to equalize, but it's not going to be a world beater by any stretch. And between the years of, I don't know, 13 and 15, I basically self-taught myself to play 1e4. I wasn't really, you know, cutting edge. I was playing some Italian, some Spanish, not a lot of it. Just mixing things up. But I knew I had to quit playing the Cole. This much I understood. And I sort of tightened up my openings, and I played a lot of chess. I played as much chess as I could. At around maybe the age of 17, I started working with my main coach, the person who, you know, taught me most things in terms of my professional growth, and he also further.
Who was that coach? Just to.
His name is Andrei Lukin, and he's not universally really known in the West, but yeah, he's done. I'm extremely grateful to what he's done for me, because I mean, I probably would have become some kind of a chess player anyway, but once I started working with him, the progress became a lot faster. And I think a year after we started working together, I became a grandmaster. But there is no, you know, hidden, wax on, wax off technique that.
Let me ask you.
Does anyone in this chat even know what I'm talking about when I say
on, wax off? They might not.
Yeah.
Karate Kid reference. Can I ask a real quick question? We have a question from the chat, but I do want to ask one thing related to this. Do you think there's one thing that a lot of players get wrong that you see commonly, like something that young players do that they shouldn't be doing that kind of hinders their progress?
That's an interesting one. Apart from the thing that I already mentioned, nothing really comes to mind. I really am a firm believer in playing like major openings. I really do think you will have to eventually, and the earlier you start, the better it is.
You know what's funny? I started like 7 months ago. I realized, like, because I would have this problem. I talked to this when I was in US Chess Women's before, but I would play like openings that I knew they weren't that great, but like I knew them well. But then the problem comes, eventually you're gonna have to switch, and then all that knowledge you had just kind of like out the window. And so now I'm like, I'm gonna play something that in 10 years it's still gonna be good. And that way, like,
but
long term.
Apart from that, yeah, it's I wish I had a better answer, because I'm sure there's like a number of things which you know, somebody who actually spent time thinking about these things would be able to pinpoint. But that's, you know, where we once again return to the fact that I do feel like a bit of an imposter here. I am an extremely strong practical player. I have, you know, some years ago I would be feeling very awkward saying those words. I have become at peace with that idea. I am very good.
The fact that you're good at chat, like you're kind of.
Yeah, I'm very good at. I'm very good at the actual, you know, process of playing chess. Mm-hmm. But I am not, you know, by any stretch of the imagination, you know, the deepest thinker about the theoretical aspects of how you work on chess. So I've done this, like my entire career was based on very good natural instincts, I think. So, you know, things that require a good, you know, thinking, teaching approach, they probably aren't the things that should be asked of me.
Do you think, though, maybe the most humble people are actually the best teachers?
If they have something to teach, yes, which
there we go. Again, yes is the answer. Peter is the best teacher. Let's move on. I have a question from one of the students, and I'm going to have them, I'm going to unmute their microphone real quick.
Sure.
Mahadi, did I get your name right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
The question is, what got you the biggest boost in your quality of play? Was it game analysis, or looking through jam games, or serious endgame study, or opening study, or like serious tournament playing, or something else?
I think we can rule of, like, for me, it's easier when I start on answering that question. It's easier for me to rule things out. Like serious endgame study, that definitely is not the answer, because I don't think I have ever really done any, and I'm not horrible at endgames, but I am a lot worse, I think, than I am supposed to be, considering where I have been in my like the heights I reached in my career. I really should be better at it. I think it's becoming a little bit of a lost art. I don't know what your Jen, Greg, I don't know what your approach to this is when you do teaching, but for me personally, I find that the analysis of your own games is kind of disappearing. I think for a very simple reason that, you know, you played a game, like when I started playing seriously against stronger position, let's say it was mid 90s. You played an interesting game, you went back to your room, and you went through it trying to figure out, you know, what the mistakes were, what the interesting points were. There was also this thing called the post-mortem, which I think has, to a large degree, disappeared from the top tournaments. And all of this is basically due to the fact that, you know, instead of trying to, you know, find that truth by, you know, sitting down with your opponent and talking about the game for 2.5 hours, you can just take your phone out of, you know, storage where the arbiter has it, switch it on, and, you know, open Chessbomb or whatever, and it will just tell you. And even that extremely weak engine will still be very good at pointing out how much of an idiot you were. And that, I think, severely discourages, proper introspection and thinking about things you've done. And I think it's very, very regrettable. I think analyzing your games was a very, very useful tool, which is, once again, I don't know if it's just me being too lazy to do it these days, or if it's like genuinely disappearing everywhere. I know I'm not doing it properly anymore, but maybe some people still are.
I can actually give a story about this. Sam Shanklin, who is, now 2,700 FIDE player.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him about this, and after his games, he's like, no, I just immediately check what the engine says. Like after his tournament game, first thing he does, turns on the engine, and immediately.
Yeah, I saw that firsthand when we were playing a match. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's not like I'm not criticizing. I'm.
Oh yeah, me neither.
I do that as well, unless I have a feeling that it will really tell me I was an idiot, and then I try to, get like at least 2 hours of uninterrupted, no self-hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I will still have to look and then, as the quote, I think it would, that's probably not the reference we need in this chat, but there's a quote from a TV series that I really, really like and use a lot because it like describes my life very well, very often. And the quote is, "Self-loathing was strong with him that day." And yeah, in order not to indulge the self-loathing too much, I think sometimes you just don't look at what the phone tells you, mm-hmm. because it will flare up immediately. But yeah, I think analyzing your own games is incredibly important. I think the higher you get, the more you regrettably have to work on openings. But for the purposes of this discussion with with the kids we have here today, I suspect you do have to mix other things in, because you're still going to get to play a game of chess, even if your openings aren't really up to scratch. Like for me, I'm really no longer really playing in those tournaments anymore. But when I was still playing in the absolute elite tournaments, somewhere around maybe, I don't know, 3 or probably around the 2017 mark, I just realized that I'm sort of unwilling to put the serious hours studying openings anymore. But that results in me like genuinely having nothing to play when I play the top events. In particular with white, because with black, I know they will be trying to kill me, and in the process of trying to kill me, they will probably give me opportunities for counterattacks if I survive. But with white, there was this like really desperate feeling of absolute emptiness, because against somebody like Anish, whichever way I open, my knowledge against his knowledge, it's extremely likely that he will have to start thinking by move 20, and the position will be dead equal. Not just not just that I will not have any advantage, but it will be dead equal. Whereas, if you go lower down, this is not going to be an issue. So you probably shouldn't be focusing your entire energy on openings. You should be, I think solving is another thing I haven't really done properly in my life, but it's extremely useful. Just try to get as well-rounded chess education as you can while you're still young. Studying classics is useful. I understand, this is maybe not the most popular answer, but I do believe studying classics is useful. Studying endgames definitely will be extremely useful. And there is definitely enough good resources out there to help you with that.
So I'm going to move on. Sure. All right. I did have a comment, though, when you made your endgame comment. Somebody said, I thought Russian schoolboys were strong endgame players.
I'm not horrible, but
so you're not. No. So he's not terrible endgame.
Strong is not how I would describe my endgame play. No, specifically, what I would say is.
Actually, I have a question for you. Simple question. Yeah, so what's your FIDE rating right now?
I lost maybe 10 points in the super final, so around, I don't know, 27-15.
All right. So what's your FIDE strength at openings?
very much depends on the opening, but I would say that probably, I don't know, these days, 2650 to 2700.
All right, how about in end games?
End games, I think I'm like 2650 on a good day, maybe 2600.
All right, so we found two things that you're lower than your strength at. What is it that you're higher than your rating at?
I think I'm a genuinely good middle game player. I think I'm very good. Like if I get to play a position where neither of us really knows, like if I get to, like if the outcome of an opening is an equal-ish position with steel pieces on the board, where neither of us really knows the solution, even perhaps if one of us, and that probably is not going to be me, it's going to be my opponent, knows the answer as in what the evaluation is, but there is no direct way to kill the game completely off. I think I'm still pretty good at moving the pieces around.
So maybe 2730, 2740.
Probably, yeah. I mean, probably higher than that, honestly.
Oh, 2800.
I think that's always been the one thing that kind of kept me afloat. So
the
like
trick
if the other two is below 2700, this one has to be higher, right?
Yeah. So the trick against Peter, play some opening that goes right to the end game, like right away, boom.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then he's a very weak player.
That would be very soul destroying.
Just a measly 2650 then. All right, I have a question here. How do you feel about Blitz? Is it good for you or bad for you? And question 2, how about Bullet?
Bullet, I understand I'm not, my answer here is not going to suddenly wean all of these kids off Bullet, but there should be, I think, limited Bullet. Like you shouldn't really be spamming Bullet all your entire waking, all of your waking hours. I can't really speak English anymore.
Like 6 hours minimum, 6 hours max per day.
I would suggest that it's fun, and I sort of understand the attraction, but that actually isn't very productive in terms of improving your chess, I think. Unless what you want to improve is specifically your bullet skills, because I don't know, there's a big bullet tournament coming up which you want to do well in. But Blitz I think is quite good. I think Blitz is very good at honing and fine-tuning your instincts, and instincts do need to be fine-tuned. They do need to be trained, and all of those things I spoke about at length, at such length that Greg is now instituting a shot clock for my answers.
I forgot to start the clock.
The time management and all of these things, they will improve if you train your intuition, which sounds slightly like an oxymoron, but I'm pretty sure intuition can be trained by putting yourself in situations where you just don't have time to figure things out properly, and you have to trust your ability and your pattern recognition to come up with correct solutions. But obviously, once again, when we talk about this type of practice, you do have to be invested in not just trying to win games of Blitz, but you need to be invested in trying to play good games of Blitz. Just being faster than the other guy is also a skill, and it's a useful skill in a lot of settings these days, when we all live in a world where most of the practice is online, and most of the practice is actually 3+1 and faster. But if we talk about developing your chess skills, you do have to care about what happens on the board, not just that you make passable moves quicker than your opponent, and then you just win rook against rook on 10 seconds.
What was my second question? Can't remember. So we have another question here. How important is creativity in chess at the top level, seeing how preparation and memorization always seems to trump everything else nowadays? And secondly, somebody's asked about Dubov and Like, how is he so creative in chess, and how much does that help him? These are two questions, but they seem kind of related.
Yeah, they are very related. I think creativity is what I think maybe distinguishes the absolute best from the people who will be slightly weaker. There are still ways of preparation at the very, very top level. Preparation is king for sure. You are not going to get very far if you are, if for you guesswork starts at around move 7, as it does for me. I'm using myself very sort of squarely as an example here, but there is still room to be creative, and somewhat depressingly, creativity, and Dubov is a good example, but there was definitely a very nice example in my generation for this. And I've already mentioned that name. Alexander Morozevich was, I think many people would say, maybe the most creative player of my generation. He played all kinds of unbelievably offbeat things. He almost single-handedly returned the French to the top level. He played like the Albion counter gambit against 2750 plus opposition and so on. He's done lots of seemingly absolutely insane things. And the one thing that always kind of struck me as being slightly unfair was people would say, look at his games and say, behold, the return of the genius amateur. Look at how good this guy is when playing this absolute crap, that he obviously kind of thinks of at the board. I, for years and years, had been his teammate on the Russian national team, and we were always on very good terms, and we spoke about chess. And I knew sort of firsthand just how much time and effort went into making sure that those completely offbeat things were actually playable. So it's still creative work. It still requires you to set up the chessboard at home and start looking at things which are not mainstream, which are considered bad in many cases, and so on. But this creativity has to be coupled with the desire and preparedness to work, and it also very much applies to Dubov, because he is, clearly an incredibly gifted, dynamic player who, on his day can create absolute masterpieces like that game against Karekin that everybody is now correctly obsessing about. But he also works on chess non-stop, basically. He just never quits clicking. He was in Yekaterinburg for the candidates doing commentary, and some evenings we would go. I was there as Alexeyenko's second, and some evenings we would go outside and just find some kind of a bar/restaurant where there would be a large table, and we would order some food, and then all of us would take out our notebooks and start like preparing for the next game away from the hotel, because staying in that hotel for like 3 weeks straight was a bit depressing. And he would occasionally join, and it seemed like a social occasion, but he would also always show up with a notebook, even though he did not have a next game to prepare for. And he would be sitting there, chewing the fat with us and, enjoying the time away from it all. But there was also always going to be a chessboard on his screen where he would be checking something. So, you still have to work, but then the results are spectacular, and you get lauded as the new savior of creative chess.
So Dubov is the savior of creative chess. I'm gonna unmute somebody real quick. I'm gonna mute Austin. He has a question for you. Austin, you're unmuted.
All right, so my question is, when I was watching a lot of top-level PNWCC Blitz games, I saw a lot of rook and bishop versus rook endgames, and I noticed that the side with the rook and bishop almost always won, even though that endgame is supposed to be a draw. So my question is, should I learn how to defend that endgame, since it seems to be reasonably common in Blitz play, and grandmasters have difficulties defending it?
Yeah, the issue is, in particular in a blitz game, you will still, I think, occasionally lose it, even if you learn how to defend it, because you get slightly panicky on like 10-second increment and so on. But yes, I would absolutely recommend spending some time, perhaps defending it against an engine. Also, finding some kind of, I'm pretty sure there must be, manuals or perhaps even online courses where you can just find and I don't know if that's the right recommendation, but I would actually recommend you stick with the Cochrane defense, with the rook sort of far away and pinning the bishop and the opposite your king, rather than the second rank defense. I think
would it be hard for you to just very quickly
I don't know how to, like, I don't know this software well enough to actually like remove
sure.
it.
I mean, basically,
so
I don't know how to explain it. I could share, but what's funny
let me
the name of that
see
tournament, the Champions Cup, like the thing you played in recently.
Oh, there it is. Hang on.
But Peter, what was the name of the tournament? The Skilling Open? Is that correct?
Yeah, the Skilling Open. Yeah.
So something very funny happened in that tournament. Is Vidit Gustrachi, I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but Vidit had rook against rook and bishop against Anish Giri. He lost that game, and then a few rounds later, he had it again against Nakamura, and he drew. I don't know. Do you think he actually studied it overnight?
But I think in his case, it's just like, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. I think he lost one and drew one. I don't think he studied it properly between games. I'm pretty sure he knew how to draw it. So I think this is called the Cochrane defense. If I'm not sharing,
yes, you're correct.
I am sharing. Yeah. So this is the Cochrane defense, where basically you're defending from from far away, and once, let's say, the king goes to the side, your king starts running in the opposite direction, and the second rank defense is this setup, basically, where, let me just make some moves. The point here is that have I already lost? Probably not. Yeah.
Well, imagine the king on d3.
Yeah, let's move some. Let's make some moves. Yeah, like you go rook g2 here. That actually is the correct way to do it, because if there's a check, like if you go check, you go king f1, and the rook cannot stay on the second because it gets attacked. And basically, it hinges on the fact that you always have this resource. But the issue with this, and the issue with the Cochrane defense, honestly, as well, is that, like, I think the only like famous time when I had this setup, this material in my entire career, was the game against Fabi in the Moscow Candidates in 2016, where it was a very interesting game. I was maybe even better at some point, and then was much worse. And then I missed a way to make a very study-like immediate draw somewhere on move 50, and ended up defending rook and bishop against rook as a weaker side. And I was defending this setup quite nicely for like 35 moves. And then Fabi finally managed somehow to sort of rotate the board 90 degrees. I was defending it, I think, with black on like the king on c8 and rook on d7, b7, this kind of a setup. And then he eventually got me to drive with the king forward towards a4. And I tried switching to the king on a4, rook b5, rook b3 setup, and I somehow couldn't. And I started panicking. And at some point, it was, I think, if he played absolutely perfectly, he was winning the game before 50 moves if he did it absolutely perfectly. But we were both obviously playing on increment, and he missed the immediate win. And then it was no longer possible in the 50. And then he actually let the king go. And by the time I claimed 50, it was just a draw again. But I think the issue with defending this endgame is, if somebody is good enough to, like, you set up a defense with the king on d1, let's say, and they realize you understand how to hold it on d1, and they are good enough to rotate you to the side of the board without, losing too much time. You do get slightly disoriented, in particular in a blitz game, and blunders happen and people lose. Like, the most striking example to me was I was playing this Zurich tournament maybe 2 or 3 years back, and Nepo won rook and bishop against rook against Kramnik in about 15 moves. And I thought, if Kramnik can lose rook and bishop against rook, there is no hope for any of us. Like, it can really happen to anyone, because trust me, he has enough culture to know how to hold this endgame in general. And he just lost it without a fight. He just started going wrong. And
was he in time trouble?
Yeah, obviously it was a quickish time control. But yeah, I thought, this really shows that nobody is entirely immune from losing it at a faster time control. But you do lower the probability by studying how to do it.
So I have a question, but before we do that, I've never actually had to defend rook and bishop versus rook. But do you know the idea of solitaire chess? Do you know what it is?
Nope.
It's kind of like you look at a top player's games and you guess their moves, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
like I guess their moves, see how I do. I had bishop and I had to defend rook against rook and bishop in one of those solitaire chess games. I was looking at Magnus's games from a tournament, and he was defending against Luke Van Wheelie, the rook versus the rook and bishop. And I had actually never seen the second rank defense, but that's what he employed. And so I kind of learned, I was like, why is he not doing the Cochrane defense? But I managed to do it and not be losing at any point. So I was kind of like feeling good about the second rank defense.
I mean, it holds. It definitely holds.
But probably in a practical game with like a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I think the Cochrane is slightly easier, but yeah, I mean, learning both is useful, because there definitely will be situations where you can actually like establish this, but not the other one. Like if you start from a slightly disadvantaged situation, like you don't start with the king in the center, you start with the king already cut off, and you just don't have enough time to go all rook g8, rook d8 there.
Okay. I'm going to unmute Tori.
Yeah, there was actually a rook and bishop against rook on one of the top boards in the under-20 nationals that are going on right now. They finished yesterday, I guess, yeah. And the player defended seemingly completely successfully, apart from one moment in the game where he made a mistake and he was getting mated against with precise play, and it was missed by the side with the bishop. So,
Tori, you're unmuted.
Yeah. So I wanted to know if, well, you probably had, but if you ever had like a plateau where you weren't going up in rating in your chess career, and like when did that happen, and how old were you?
I had, I think, a couple obvious periods like this, like between maybe the ages of 13 and 15, and then maybe the next one was between 15 and 18. Maybe not the entire 3 years between 15 and 18, but I was kind of stuck amassing. I mean, as results showed, I wasn't really stuck. I was just kind of assuming my next semifinal form, as the as the quote may be. But those things definitely do happen, and they normally aren't permanent. So they shouldn't be, cause for despair. And as a kind of a funny personal anecdote, I remember the first time I saw Vladimir Kramnik, that was before I became a pupil of the Kasparov School. I played in I think that was the last ever Soviet under 18. We didn't have under 20s in those years. It was under 18. It was, I think, my second one. The first one I played, he wasn't there yet. But the second one I played, he came and he was, touted as this extremely gifted youngster who is supposed to be very, very good. And he did fine. He did better than me, but he was older than me by a year, which I was like maybe 11, he was 12. So that's a big year there. That's a big difference, obviously. And I think I scored +1 and he scored +3 in that tournament. Neither were, anywhere near winning scores. And then he sort of disappeared from junior tournaments. And I thought to myself, well, that was that. I mean, they told us he was very good, but they probably were just wrong, weren't they? Because he's no longer there. And the next time I saw him, he was kind of winning every single game and went from being like 24-50 to becoming a member of the Olympic team and scoring 8.5 out of 9 in his first Olympiad. And he genuinely, I think, disappeared for a year before that, and nobody saw him, and he wasn't really making any waves or anything. And his rating definitely wasn't going up. So this does happen occasionally, and it's not really cause for concern, I think.
Who's this player?
Kramnik. I thought.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you say Kramnik.
No, he did become somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, decent player. I'm gonna unmute Arnav. Arnav, are you ready? Sorry, I meant Aryan. Arnav sent me a sad face. I don't know what that means. Arnav sent the sad face. Aryan.
He is probably not very happy with the quality of entertainment he is being provided with today, and I apologize.
How long in a day should you work on your strengths, and how long in a day should you work on your weaknesses?
I think, you know, if you can identify your weaknesses clearly, that's already a huge step forward. And if you know how to work on them, you should probably be working on them. I think probably rectifying things that are going wrong is going to improve you faster than improving things that are going well. I don't know what I'm basing this on, but that's like the instinctive feeling I have. Like if for some reason something is, you know, so glaringly obvious as being wrong that you can recognize it at such a young age, because I think normally, you know, when I consider chess players of your age, you know, weaknesses are just basically inexperience. They aren't really anything structural more than they are simply lack of experience. Just that you will learn, you know, the patterns will continue forming in your head, and you will just eradicate them without even thinking about them very much. But if you know that there is something you just can't do well, if you've already identified that somehow, by all means start by trying to get rid of that thing, because that will be extremely useful.
Can I ask you a related question about that? Has there ever been a time in your career where there was something you were clearly weak at and you focused on it and got better at it?
Sort of, yes. That's one of my most favorite gifts. That pirate from, I think it's maybe, I'm trying to figure out where it is. The pirate that says, "Well, yes, but actually no." This platform doesn't allow me to share GIFs, right? That's very sad. Anyway, the answer sort of is yes, but the way I rectified it was just basically by playing more. When I started playing top tournaments, which was at the age of like 17, 18, when I won my first Russian, and generally became a bit of a more known quality, and I was young enough and sort of interesting enough for people to start inviting me to good round robins. I was a very, very good dynamic player, and I was absolutely rubbish at technical play and sort of positional play in general, and people could absolutely bore me to death. And you know, people like, I don't know, Boris, for instance, Boris Gelfand would just like run rings around me in positions where I couldn't, you know, threaten his king or start some kind of mayhem on the board. But I never, it did become much better. I think I have become a much more, you know, well-rounded player, but I didn't do it by specifically studying technical positions. I just did it by playing against Boris more, and then some more, and then some more. And it's a kind of a, you know, sink or swim type approach where if you're good enough, you will just by, you know, osmosis, by being next to good positional players, by being beaten by positional players, you will pick things up which they do well and you don't yet. And you can try to incorporate that into your own play, and you learn by analyzing with them after the game. Once again, something that has sadly been going away. You absorb some of their wisdom. So, but it wasn't any kind of structural work. It was, I knew I was weaker than them at that, but I still, it wasn't even laziness as such. It's, I still don't know how you necessarily improve like positional understanding apart from being consistently beaten by good positional players and learning from them.
So I have another question from Violet. I'm going to unmute you.
I was wondering what you think is the best time control for training games when you're not preparing for like a specific tournament.
That's let me think. I think unless you're trying to simulate the exact environment you will be playing in, I suspect going slower than 20 will absolutely bore you out of your skull. I would suggest maybe even 15 plus 10, honestly, because I think 15 plus 10 is a time control where you already have decent a decent enough amount of time so that you can take maybe not one but two pauses to calculate. Once again, I'm basing this on absolutely nothing. I haven't really played training matches in quite some time, and I'm trying to remember what we were playing as training when I was helping Kramnik. That was ages and ages ago. I suspect half of this Zoom call wasn't born yet, but I think we were playing a lot of Blitz. But we were also playing some slightly slower games, but I don't think they were slower than 15 plus something, maybe 20 plus something in some very outside cases, but I would really doubt it.
I got a question here. Is studying AlphaZero a good idea?
Probably, but I wouldn't know how. Like what is being implied by studying AlphaZero? Just like download a database and just go through the games one by one. I don't think.
I'm not sure. Going through it. Somebody said.
No, I mean, I would suggest that it's not AlphaZero, but it's the closest approximation that we have right now. You definitely should be using Leela quite a bit, and also I have found I've not really been doing that. I think until I started working with Kirill for the candidates this year. Running both, let's say, Stockfish and Leela at the same time provides a very, very interesting kind of an overview of two very different ways of thinking about the same position. You do have to be kind of mindful that if it's a very sharp tactical position, Leela will be occasionally blundering mate in 7. But not kidding. I'm like genuinely not kidding. Maybe the absolute latest version won't, but they still are significantly weaker at spotting immediate tactics than non-neural network engines. But that is useful. But studying specifically AlphaZero, I wouldn't know where to start.
I have a question. What's your best performance ever in Titled Tuesday? What was your best score? Did you ever win the knockout?
No, I got to the finals of the knockout once and lost to David Anton when there were still knockouts.
Okay.
That was very regrettable. I was completely winning in the first game with black and then decided to go for something pretty instead of something practical, which I normally don't do. But I was also streaming and I felt like, I should give my stream a kind of a decision with flair, and that decision with flair turned out to be completely incorrect.
So it was the people watching your stream. It was their fault.
Absolutely. I blame the stream. Yeah, it's absolutely the stream's fault.
Okay. I have a question. Now I'm getting some silly questions. Is playing tournament games with a hood better?
I don't think I've ever done that because generally I think the tournaments I play in have this dress code thing, so they limit my ability to do fun things with wardrobe. But I mean, being comfortable during the game is very, very underrated, I think.
Well, they say you have played Titled Tuesday with a hood.
Yeah, I have actually played. Yeah,
have you compared your results with the hood? And without the hood, and
I absolutely crushed the Swiss playing in a hood, and I think sufficient time has passed that I can say that we were, there was Greg and Jen probably are the two people in this chat who know what I'm talking about. But at least in the old days, there was those things called poker houses where people would just rent a house and grind from it. There would be like a large table and there would be like 10 notebooks on it and people would play together. So that particular Title Tuesday that I played in the hood was played from Kirill's place, and we were the Swiss portion we were playing. I was sitting opposite Kirill and Andrei Yesipenko was sitting in the next room. We were not looking at each other's screens, but we were all three playing at the same time. And me and Kirill actually got into the top 8. Both of us. We didn't play each other, and we both lost in the top 8. So that was kind of saddening, because it was, for a second there, I thought it might be like a proper triumph for that particular chess house that evening, but we did not succeed.
Can I beat you now? Because I'm wearing the hood.
You
probably
we played one titled, right? I think you were.
We played a title Tuesday, and we played on Lead Chess. And you know, that game I played in Lead Chess, I was studying my openings really hard, and I like hit you with like a novelty almost that I had prepared. I would study it all the time in Chessable, and I got a good position.
Yeah, I think you were much better at some point, but
it was like some kind of thing where I sack a pawn, but I knew it was good, and I've since studied it even further, so I would get a better position if I played it against you next time. But yeah, somehow I botched it up, and you beat me. And then on the title Tuesday, I messed the opening up, but somehow I kind of like almost came back. Do you remember this game?
Vaguely, I remember it became a mess, but I think I kind of prevailed in the end somehow. But yeah, it definitely became a mess at some point.
I wasn't wearing the hoodie, so it's not really fair.
Yeah, this thing actually doesn't come up very like this is the. I have 2 Nakitano fleeces, and one is an actual hoodie, and this one isn't. This is like as high as it goes. Is it better to eat while playing? No, you should not be eating while like. On a serious note, definitely don't eat at the table. That's like genuinely impolite. But also, I would suggest that probably like eating serious food during the game is ill-advised, because it will redirect some blood flow to digestion instead of. This is a semi-serious answer. I don't think like for me personally, like it just puts me half to sleep, and that's not very conducive to playing well.
Are you suggesting only 1 cheeseburger per game and no more?
I generally have some kind of a snack like after move 40.
Yeah.
But until move 40, I try not to. Like I drink water or I drink coffee if it's available there, but I don't eat.
I was joking about the cheeseburger, everyone. Quick question.
Also, wrong chess streamer for that joke.
Do you like to be a crewmate or an imposter?
I am yet to play a single game of Among Us, which is extremely.
What do you think? Do you like to lie or tell the truth?
I think I would be a horrible, horrible imposter. I think as a crewmate, I could learn to do tasks quickly enough, and like I would be okay at that, and I would just silently vote with the majority at meetings. But no, but like this is so heartbreaking, because the game is not dying exactly, but it's nowhere near as hyped up as it was when it just appeared. And when it just appeared, I had invites to the absolutely stunning lobbies. I could have played in some of the best lobbies out there, and I was just so afraid of looking stupid that I said no. And I'm regretting it. I'm regretting it every day. So it was a very, very poor decision.
Somebody said, "Is it better to wear pants or shorts while playing?" We're really getting to like. The whole 90 minutes was just to get to the real important question.
Yeah, to the real, like, cutting edge. Yeah. Once again, sort of depends on whether they arbitrate for that. But I find that, like, we're obviously talking about, although I actually know, maybe, with the American crowd, maybe you actually mean over the board tournaments. Yeah, because like for me, this is a question about how I play online, right? It's not really much of a question about official tournaments, but the culture is different. We have had a famous instance of somebody trying to play a World Cup in shorts, and that didn't go particularly well for anybody involved.
Should we say final 3 questions?
I'm fine. I feel like I've wasted enough time early on in the show that I shouldn't really be limiting how long it runs. Because
final 50 questions.
Probably not.
I got one that's, I feel like it's familiar, but not exactly. What is the 3rd worst move against the Dutch? Somebody asked.
I mean, D4, F5, and now top 3 moves, or what?
Oh, the 3rd worst. Not the worst, not the 2nd worst. but the third worst.
Okay, so let's.
We don't want to hear the worst one. You don't even tell us. Just only the third worst.
I mean, knight a3 maybe?
Knight a3.
I think the worst, I mean, it's actually not that easy to nominate the worst move in that position. Like, g4 is genuinely playable. Yeah, I mean, maybe f3. Yeah, king d2. Okay, king d2 is number 8. King d2 and bishop h6, actually. Yeah,
h6, yeah.
Yeah, those weren't actually the moves in my head. Okay, if we think those are the worst two, and they are, third worst is the actual like worst but limit sort of legal move in this position. Yeah, f3 is not great. I was going to say b4, but they do play
this
b4.
Board. We should put this on the board to follow.
Yeah, hang on. Default position. Yeah, so I mean, if we exclude king d2, which we should, and we exclude bishop h6, which we should, I mean, this is kind of ugly, but they do actually play b4 in some Leningrads with the pawn still on c2. It's not entirely pointless. A4 is kind of pointless, but like once again, it's not going to hurt your position very much.
Let me ask you this. Is there any move that white could play here where white is slightly worse? Other than those two, king d2 and bishop h6.
I think you might actually be slightly worse after g4 if h3, g3, but I'm not entirely sure. Like, I don't know what this position is supposed to be. People are saying queen d2. I don't think queen d2 ruins your position enough. I think you can still switch to some kind of b3, bishop b2, g3, bishop g2. You're not going to be in too much trouble. Although, like knight f6, knight e4 is now becoming a topic. Yeah, maybe queen d2 is not great.
We're going to have to put this in Nila.
Absolutely, yeah. Solve those burning questions of the day.
Have you ever under-promoted in a tournament game?
Yes.
Non-ironically, like to actually because it was the best move.
No, if I have a feeling I have, but like the most famous example is actually against me, not by me. And that's a very hurtful game to remember. That's a game I lost to Vladimir Malakhov in one of the World Cups, where the final move of the game was d2 takes e1, knight check. But I'm pretty sure I've also done it, but I can't recall off the top of my head the situation where it happened.
We're gonna stop in just a minute. So we're gonna ask one more question. One more. Who has a good one? Send it to me. All right. Send me the question. Write it down. I don't even know what that question means. Oh, you got 30 seconds to answer this question. Are you ready?
No. I'm never ready.
Is Hearthstone bad?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
But not in a way you would think.
Oh. What is it?
I mean, it's very addictive, and occasionally I get people coming into my stream noticing I'm not playing chess and asking, how easy it is to get into this game, so that I can follow what you do better. And my normal instant reply is just don't. There are probably better ways to destroy brain cells, but I am sort of pod committed by this point. I have spent the last 5 years, or maybe even 6 by this point, playing the game. So.
All right, thanks so much for coming on and spending time with us. I hope everyone here had fun. I'm gonna open the chat for the last minute, so you can all say something silly. Much appreciated. Great to see all the members of the US Chess Girls and Women's Program. It was super cool having you. And next, I don't know which day of the week it is, but on the 29th, we have Irina Crush, and you are more than welcome to come again. We hope to see you all there. Everybody have a great day. Thanks for people watching on Chess Dojo. Happy holidays, everyone, too.
All of those things. Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope I haven't been too useless. I genuinely, I never know.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.